Good morning, class. How you doing today? Professor Reeves. Basically we're going to be talking about supply chain management. So here in week one, we're going to talk about the week one of emerging trends. This week we will discuss the supply chain management from a macro perspective and this process as well as how logistics management fits into the larger picture. In this lesson, we will briefly review supply chain management, uncertainty of risk that can impact the supply chain, and 3 levels of decision making, and where we can go from here in progressing through the class. Hey, so let's get started. Very simply put, the supply chain management is the management of moving or flow of goods and services. The process begins with the procurement of raw materials that get moved from to the manufacturer. Once these goods are complete, the next step is to get them to the retailer or the consumers. This is a very high level definition of what supply chain management is. Inventory levels, spare parts, reverse logistics, and strategic sourcing are all also integral parts of the successful supply chain. Now, there are 5 basic components to every supply chain, and they are key to developing the efficient supply chain. So, plan is 1, development, making, deliver, and return. Under the plan, it's self-explanatory. A company must have a strategy as to what is it they want to produce. The company must plan to meet the demand of what is required for production to begin. This could be the materials or even sourcing waste management to come out and pick up the byproduct of what is produced. For example, scrubbers for an exhaust and so on. Most of the time, planning is associated with how the product will get to the customer efficiently. Now, the next step is developing. So this follows with getting the supplier or the material needed for the developing of a relationship with them to provide materials on a continuous basis at a specific cost per item. However, this is where the negotiations should take place to ensure that both parties are comfortable with the set guidelines. The next step is making. This is one where the product is made, tested, boxed up, and sent out to the customer. This is where the product meets the demand of the customer, and where it's finalized, product rolls out of the assembly line. Also, the 4th step is delivering. Another easy answer. Here's where the product is delivered to the customer on a planned timeline for the product to be used. Delivering involves numerous parts of all the way from the beginning to the customer and how the customer wants the product and when and where it to be delivered. If a product is sourced from overseas and has a deadline of 1 week to be there, it will not move via the slowest route, but along the quickest. And vice versa, if there's no timeline for a product, it can move on the slowest, such as a ship or something like that nature. Finally, return. This is where the product is brought back to the manufacturing plant or location due to defects or because the customer no longer needs or wants the product. Hey, no store wants that. Nobody wants to handle returns. They always want their product to go back out. But however, as well as I do, since we make stuff, it can break, it can mess up. So therefore, there has to be some type of return policy. Now, you can't overlook the buyer's remorse when people buy stuff and then they want to bring it back because they don't like it. Hey, it happens. That's why the stores do put the stuff out there so you can play with it a little bit to see if you like it or not, right? Okay, but anyway, here again under return, here's what management will be looking at how to solve the answer questions that may arise due to return. With all this being said, it should be easy that there are so many variables for management and efficient supply chain. There are a number of challenges that logistics professionals run into on a day-to-day basis. Some of these issues are internal, some are external, and many times they can be out of our hands. Hey, it happens. So some of the bigger issues can come from suppliers and carriers responsible for delivering materials to the manufacturer. Other larger issues are managing inventory levels and deciding what type of method your business should use. So what are some of the issues facing the supply chain today? Well, looking at a recent global trade expansion over the last few years, a major challenge is the shortage of highly educated supply chain managers that are capable of reaching out into foreign countries with confidently representing the form of the product. Hey, that's why over the last couple of years, that's why schools such as ours it has a actual program to bring about these quality educated people. So there is a need for you. So please take this matriculation seriously, because I tell you, there are people who looking for people who not only know who is educated, but also have the experiences and know-how. So take the time to find interns, or position yourself into a position where while you're getting educated, you're also getting experience, because you're needed. You're needed. Another challenge facing the supply chain is another challenging facing, or how do we put this? Another challenge that supply chain faces is always the reducing of costs while keeping the customer satisfied. The price of goods are rising every day, so there will always be a challenge of finding new and innovative ways to produce these goods, hoping to keep the prices down and the customer in the end happy with the services being provided. Rapid changes in the global supply occur when companies are within a supply chain network need to be flexible and change with time. Maintaining inventory levels is another challenge. Customers have to manage the ebbs and flows of customer demand with potential risk and disruptions can occur. Managers are constantly trying to capture the data needed to keep up with the demand and plan for risk. Another challenge is organizational relationships. Many of the company needs to communicate with each other to understand the primary goal. When strategies are created, it should be with the departments involved in the supply chain. Internal and external relationships are important. A house divided will fail. It will take managers to rally and come up together to success of a company. Measuring performance is another challenge. Amazon is constantly evaluating themselves to make sure they are meeting customer satisfactions. This can be a challenge when consumers are not responsive or managers are not in touch with their target market. For example, I always buy from Amazon. I always get some type of survey. Now, I don't fill them out all the time either. Or even better yet, it's if another customer wants to buy something or get a review on something because they see I bought something, they want me to provide the review to that other customer. So sometimes it is good when they're doing that but people can understand how the product works and actually know that there's a person actually buying this product and not something just made up. Technology is a challenge within the supply chain. In my opinion, supply chain sector has lacked in the past in using technology to its advantage. In the recent year, there has been an explosion of platforms to help companies to manage their supply chain. Companies such as Red Prairie, SAP, Transplace, Lean, and many others are leaders in the supply chain software. They allow customers to select carriers through the use of bids and manage of the inventory and keep track of in and outbound freight. Managing transportation is another challenge for the supply chain managers. Capacity has become a little tighter because of new rules and from the government called CSA, the new hours of service, and the way drivers are scored have made trucking companies a little more cautious about how they operate their fleet. Also, to add, it's the lack of new drivers coming into the industry. And it could be just a varied of reasons. Just there's no interest, or failing of drug test, and just probably just not a big push to really bring in new drivers, or talking, with young people who are getting ready to come out of college or getting ready to come out of high school. Because one of the aspects is you can't only be 21 to be able to drive a tractor trailer. So, fuel costs, repairs, taxes, and other driver shortages are a few issues that are plaguing in the trucking industry. Security is another issue that supply chain managers must address. A few years ago, modern day pirates were attacking ships, also with the use of computers, and tech companies have to be careful of hackers and protect themselves, even from inside espionage. In summary, management must analyze their supply chain and to continue to evaluate their processes. So this is the end of week 1. I hope that you got a lot out of it. Please read your resources, look at, go through your text, get in the forums and participate. We can learn a lot from each other. All right. Thank you. Have a great day.